Okay, good evening. I'd like to call the September 10th, 2013 Sherborn School Committee meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everyone. I'd like to start off by recognizing Superintendent Bliss for an introduction.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hess, and welcome back, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back in school, and we'll talk a little bit about the opening and how things went in a few minutes, but we certainly want to get through some introductions first, top of the order. So it's with great pleasure that we welcome Mr. Frank McGordy as our assistant principal at Pine Hill. Frank's been with us for the better part of the summer, and we are really privileged and quite pleased to have you on board with the team at Pine Hill. And I know that Barbara wanted to do a little introduction. Dr. Brown?
We are delighted, as Superintendent Bliss mentioned, Assistant Principal McGordy has hit the ground running. He is a quick study. He is a people person. He is a swift learner of the new teacher evaluation system and our revised 504 plans and all kinds of regulations. And so he's been worth his weight in gold. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, terrific, and welcome, Frank. And I would also be remiss in not formally introducing Dr. Karen LeDuc as the Assistant Superintendent. This is her first school committee meeting here in Sherborn, so welcome, Karen. She has been a phenomenal asset over the summer, and it's so wonderful to have a partner in the central office to join myself and Chris and be able to really just have Karen take off and run with some of the things that we have going on system-wide. As you know, there are a lot of lofty initiatives underway, and it's so refreshing and pleasing to be able to have a partner in Karen. So welcome, and we're like the three musketeers over here in the central office now. Right, Chris?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
House.
you.
Thank you.
And welcome to both of you. Our first thing on our agenda now is the Sherborn School Committee minutes of 5/28. Are there any comments, suggestions, corrections on those minutes?
I had a comment, I have to find them right now, but do we want to just call them workshop? I mean, I was sort of struggling with the whole idea of they were minutes and that the whole couple of pages, like this first page are notes, but then that whole other section is the document that Greg wrote, correct? That was your document that you wrote, so I thought that it shouldn't be part of the minutes. I thought the minutes are just that first page, so I just wanted to have a separate supplement maybe, but
Right now,
because it's very personal and very, I thought it was very, just, more of a personal document. So I'd rather it not be part of the minutes.
What's the will of the committee here?
I agree with that. I think that it can't be presented really as part of the minutes because it's not what we discussed. It was presented, but it's not what we discussed.
Right.
I agree.
Yes.
Okay.
That's probably I think also the key point that that's not what was discussed. What was discussed was reflected on page 1.
Okay.
And we got to a little bit of that second document,
Yeah.
but
We can
Okay.
certainly, tomorrow, we can just pull those two documents apart. Would it be the will of the committee to at least have the supplemental document appear as a publication backing up the meeting, or? Okay.
But I would like to make it clear though that it was not created by the school committee,
Right.
and does not necessarily reflect the views or the information gathered by members of the school committee.
Any other?
Mr. Garland suggesting it not even be.
I don't think it needs to be part of it.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Would someone want to make a motion that we accept the first page as the minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept the first page as the minutes of the May 28th workshop.
Workshop, right. Second? Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. All right, now we have the minutes of the 6/12 meeting.
I move to accept those minutes of 6/12.
I have some questions.
I
Okay.
have some questions as well.
All right,
All right, someone want a second, and we'll discuss it?
Second.
Okay.
I guess my question is with regard to the dollars and this is on the second page in the after section. In the references to the assistant principal, the whole discussion was about, I thought, was about keeping an effort to keep Bill Benias. So does that need to be part of this? And I also thought that it was sort of time sensitive. It was for, it's something that moving some dollars around that's gonna last for a year, was my understanding, because we were moving dollars from technology to
Correct.
exchanging some dollars, and questions were asked, well, what's gonna happen a year later? And it just seems like it should reference the then assistant principal, because that's what the conversation was about.
Yeah, and actually, I agree with you. I had made a note that we could just put in if necessary, which would make it, you know, that it was more, yeah, I agree with you.
It was an attempt to
Yeah.
keep him, right?
Right,
So,
so somehow we have to adjust that.
Where are you suggesting the if necessary? Susan?
The sentence that says, this would free up $22,000 for fiscal year 14 budget to be used to make the assistant principal to 1.0 FTE if necessary. I think that would get around it if you wanna even, you know.
I just wanted to be reflected in
More
discussions
clear.
about, there was more detail to the discussion, and so I voted against that, but once we voted for it, I moved that the assistant principal position be increased from 0.8 to 1.0 as a matter of formality specifically for Mr. Benias. So the discussion was around him, and it just seems like that should be noted.
Yeah, that's
in the
kind of,
minutes.
it's sort of missing, because the position is a 0.8 now, right? Isn't
So
it?
it's actually it's a 195-day contract, so Mr. McGorty will work the school year plus some additional anchor time on either end of the end of the school year and the beginning of the school year. And it came in, we were able to have the contract for the new assistant principal come in within the guidelines, what had been.
Which guidelines,
Yeah,
though?
including that 22 or not?
It was 82,000.
Does that include the 22? It's a little sensitive subject, but,
Well, we can go back and look at that.
'cause I don't, yeah, because I don't know if anybody was on the hiring committee, or,
Mr. Hess was
Yes.
on
yeah,
the
okay.
screening committee.
I don't know if do we need to discuss it in a different place, or?
We certainly can. I mean, we can discuss it in executive session if that's,
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe we should do that.
Okay.
Okay.
that'd be
All
fine.
right.
Is that okay?
So you want this,
Just to,
I guess
I understand what you're saying.
It's up to you guys, but it just seems like it should reflect the greater detail that it was,
Right.
it revolved around a particular person.
Yeah.
And, now I know, I wanna make it more clear, how to make it more clear, but
Yeah.
it just seems like the record should reflect that.
So can I just quickly clarify, then you're saying that, because that was ages ago in my world, so I don't remember. Was there a separate vote on the changing it from 0.8 to 1.0?
Yes.
Yes.
So,
After we after we changed the money around, we had to vote on that. Then
Okay,
to use
then-
that money the way
That's
we
right, yeah.
wanted to, we then
Okay.
voted on changing I guess from a 0.8 to a 1.0.
just the designation of it,
Mhm.
okay.
And it should also be noted that subsequent to the vote and to that meeting, obviously, Mr. Banios vacated his position, assumed a position in another neighboring school district, and obviously that created the vacancy, so the effort on the part of the school committee for, as it were, related to the individual was certainly honored and whatnot, and then the individual made a decision otherwise.
Yeah, we get that. I
Yeah,
just wanted
yeah.
the record to
Yeah.
show that there was more to it than just what's here.
I agree.
okay,
Okay.
so
Yep.
what is the, if necessary wording sufficient, or do we want some other amendment? So,
Sounds like it,
To-
a little bit more information, just as far as.
I don't know if it changes the legality of the vote. I would say that in an effort to keep the assistant principal at that time.
okay.
We'll do-
But I don't want to change the effect of the vote at this
Correct.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
Okay.
Yeah, because you want to historically for it to be accurate. If you years later maybe read it, if you ever look back, you might not remember what that was
I mean,
all
you
about.
could
What it
just
was.
parenthetically, you say this is an effort to keep
Yeah.
the assistant principal at that time. How do we satisfy me.
Do you want that in the vote or in the verbiage before it? Or both?
I think the verbiage before it, probably, because as we look back on it now, you know, I guess the vote was just purely to increase the assistant principal from 0.8 to 1.0,
Okay.
which is,
Okay, so that'd be
Just
before
what it
that
was.
then. So you will enter,
So I would just add after to use, this would free up $22,000 of the FY14 budget to be used to make the assistant principal 1.0 FTT in an effort to retain the current assistant principal.
yes. Yeah, that's what I mean.
okay, does someone want to make a motion? We approve these as amended?
Well, I
You're, I'm
have
sorry?
another thing
Okay.
outside of this one.
All right,
In this whole section of the, I brought up the point and asked for some of these funds to be used in this experiment for the healthier food option,
Correct.
and that's not reflected here.
So we could certainly add that. There was no action taken around that,
No, I
but you
can
want
take
to
it, but
mention.
at least that,
Yep.
because I'd like for it just to be in our records, because I think that's important.
Yep.
And if you'd like some language on that, I can get that to you.
could,
Do you recall what it was,
you-
Amy?
you-
I don't think I still have those notes
Do-
at home, but it's
Do you
probably
think-
easier if, that way I know you agree with what's being put in.
could you perhaps paraphrase what you might want to give away, or?
I'd have to look at it, but it's something along the lines that a discussion was had about a proposed experiment to evaluate the effectiveness or the what am I looking for? The interest by the students of a healthier lunch option to be tested on a regular routine basis.
Okay,
To expand
so
an
we-
offering through food service or something.
all right.
Yeah.
So in that spirit of the, any other corrections? Okay, someone want to move to accept as amended then?
I move we accept the minutes of June the 12th as amended.
So moved.
Second? Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed?
Oh, I agree.
You agree?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so now we have the, our rather short meeting of June 17th, which was to approve the school improvement plan. Any discussion on these? Have a motion to approve?
accept.
Okay, second? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay.
I abstain because I was not there.
Okay, now we're open for community comments. Are there any comments from the community? Okay, if not, then I'd like to welcome Mr. Scott Embry and Mr. David Welch, the co-chairs of the CSA, and if you would like to present a report, we'd be glad to hear it.
My name is Dave Welch. I will present a report on behalf of Scott, myself, and the CSA. First, I want to thank you for having us here tonight. We're very excited. We're obviously brand new to the CSA, and we're hoping to do it justice in terms of following our predecessors, as well as having a successful year for the Pine Hill community and students. It surprises me how quickly things take off. You all probably appreciate this, but during the summer, Scott and I had to dive in. We thought we were going to get the summer off like the children, but not quite. Dive in head first into a lot of the responsibilities and obligations that surround the CSA to ensure that we got off to a good start. Even before the doors of the school opened, we're hosting a luncheon for teachers that was received well. I understand most of the food was consumed, which is always a good sign. We also, the day after school started, hosted an ice cream social. We exceeded our budget, which means we had a great turnout. That's always good news to me on something like that, where we're providing an event, an opportunity for the community at no cost to them. And it exceeded our expectations despite some challenges with the weather that day. Rolling forward, we had our first board meeting this morning in the cafeteria at Pine Hill. Those chairs are a lot smaller than the one here, so that was exciting. And the tables are also lower. The great turnout. We had our entire board there. We also actually had one brave parent that showed up as well. We ran late, which I understand is normal, so that was good, keeping with tradition. And our focus at the moment in terms of looking ahead is really around two or three main areas. One is execution. Scott and I are cognizant of how well CSA has done in the past. We want to keep that momentum moving forward. We want to make sure that we are honoring our existing commitments in terms of what the expectations are from CSA. So we may not grab onto new things in addition to what we're already doing right out of the gate. We'll be very mindful of what our commitments are and try to do an excellent job in executing on them. We want to be more efficient. We want to make sure that we're easy to work with. We want it to be an easy interface to work with you. We want it to be an easy interface to work with the community. And we hope that we will make it easier to work with CSA, whether you're a parent, administrator, and provide as much access as possible. And along those lines, communication. We want to make sure that we're getting our word out there, the value of the CSA, what contributions we're making, and what benefits are available to families and students for the enrichment programs that we're providing. So we have a focus on those three main areas. The last thing that I'll leave you with is in terms of a main event coming up for us. If you haven't noticed, at the 16-27 split, we have a banner up on October 6th. We'll have our second annual Pine Hill 5K and Fun Run. We strongly encourage members of Pine Hill, Central Office, and the committee to participate or run if you want to run. We expect the turnout to be even better than last year, which was excellent, and it's a great opportunity both for the CSA to get their name there as well as for the Pine Hill community to get together.
With regards to that 5K run, it is October 6th, is that a Sunday, and what time would that be?
It is a Sunday, that is correct, and the start time is 8:30 a.m. on Cemetery Lane.
Did you notice there's a typo in the banner?
I did not, but I have poor eyesight, so
Can I ask you a favor?
yes.
Could you email the board the dates for the CSA meetings? Just, yeah,
Yes.
think about that'd be great, thank you.
Of course.
Our next meeting will be Thursday, October 3rd, I believe, at 9 a.m. at the Pine Hill Dining Room. I think historically it's been the first Thursday of the month. However, we're looking as a board if maybe another day works better for maximizing our attendance. So at this point, our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, October 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we see the subcommittee reports, and it says the Pine Hill Building Committee, and there's actually three places in the agenda. It's the Building Committee, then FY15 Capital Planning, and then the Capital Projects with Christine Tague. So I think that if, with the agreement of the committee here, we can do all three of those perhaps at one time, since they're central on the same thing. And Christine, perhaps could you start first with projects you've already completed, et cetera?
The current year projects that have been completed and are still in process that were approved at the annual town meeting, the 13th annual town meeting. The kitchen floor and auditorium rug has been completed. The front entrance concrete has been completed, and the building security has been completed. One of the things we're still working on, and it's because of the length of lead time that's required, is the building window project. We've met with the building committee. There's a process we have to go through by law as far as the design services provided. We've selected Habib and Associates for the design in the amount of $24,000. Last Thursday, they were in to actually walk the building and start to design the bid specifications. We've also met with the Energy Committee concerning the efficiencies of the windows. Once the draft is completed, we'll probably bring the RFP, the construction specifications back to the building committee so that everybody's on board as to how we're proceeding. And that's basically our goal is to have the bids out the door by mid-October and an award sometime in November for construction to commence at the close of school in spring of 14.
Okay, thank you. And the building committee has already had a meeting, and we're drawing up a preliminary list of the needs for this coming year, because we, as you know, we have a long-range study, and it's a 20-year study, as a matter of fact. And every year, we're going to try and address certain needs of the building that are the most salient and will have the most impact on students. And there are several areas where, particularly in the lower level, like in those rooms that are off the library, where we're going to have to replace some of the flooring. And there are certain other areas where we're going to move ahead. And we're going to try to meet fairly early with the capital budget committee to get this going, so that we will have time for people to vet what we're putting forward and have this move along. Do you have anything to add to that, Mr. Bliss?
No, other than we definitely, it's the will of actually all three of our school committees to really do a lot more analysis on capital earlier in the budget building season. So all three respective capital committees are actually convening in sort of September, October, so that we can really get our house in order in terms of what our capital requests will be, so that we're not in the throes of budget season for FY15 and then all of a sudden saying, oh my gosh, we need to stop and really get everything together with capital. So I'd really like to thank Mr. Hess and Mr. Garland in particular for just an incredible amount of time this summer. Both are serving on the negotiating committee as well for the teachers negotiation contract, and every single Tuesday morning throughout the summer we've been meeting, and I know that Mr. Hess, with his additional responsibilities on the building committee as well, it's been a very busy summer, and I just wanted to make sure that we recognize all committee members, but certainly Mr. Hess and Mr. Garland. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Bliss, do you have a report on the...
Wait, sorry, can I just
Yes.
ask, does the septic that was referenced, and I don't know if you're gonna get to
It's
that,
in
does
the-
that fall
it's in the
underneath
report.
building committee, or is that separate?
Well, there are some things mentioned in the long-term plan, some rather small parts of that.
Mhm.
But right now, looking at the septic, there's still some discussion on where the responsibility for that will lay in the end. And so we're still trying to flesh that out. There's certain things such as pipes and pumping and so forth that would be our regular part. But if we were to look at a wider fix for that, then we might have to look in a different direction as far as how this would be done.
And certainly we can speak to that a bit in the construct of the report too. We'll get to that. So thank you very much, Mr. Hess, and thank you for welcoming us all back to school. It was a phenomenal opening. We opened, of course, a couple weeks ago on Monday, August the 26th, and the opening remarks in large part revolved around honoring and respecting a lot of the traditions and a lot of the sort of hallmarks that make Pine Hill and make our school system in the aggregate wonderful. And we also talked about a lot of change in the schools, 53 different staff changes that took place throughout the school system, whether it was additions or moves or what have you. And it was just a phenomenally welcoming and warm session that we had with faculty and staff and school committee members who attended. One of the things we started, and I'd like to draw your attention to it, is we administratively decided over the summer to nominate someone from each school building and from every single department throughout the school system who is an unsung hero. Someone who just goes above and beyond the call of duty and performing his or her function, and does so without any regard for without looking for recognition. And Pam Ritchie was the unanimous nominee and recipient from Pine Hill. Pam did a phenomenal job last year in working in her classroom to really meet the needs of all of her students, as she always does, but in particular she had some needs within her classroom last year that just really she just went so far above and beyond the call of duty. Pam is a stellar employee. She's a superb teacher, and she was just streaming in tears when being recognized. And so everyone is listed there, and from athletics to every school building, et cetera, including a custodian from Chickering who unfortunately lost his battle with ALS over the summer, and whose brother still works at Chickering, also as a custodian, who received the award for his brother in his brother's memory. So it was a very moving and I think fitting tribute to a lot of folks who do a lot of work to make it wonderful here. So that being said, I'd like to really just publicly thank Karen and Chris for phenomenal work over the summer. It really was very, very busy. It was an 8-week summer, and we had a lot to get done. For Karen, it was this huge indoctrination to what can be a complex school system at times. And for Chris, it was closing fiscal 13, opening fiscal 14, knowing that we want to front load capital for fiscal 15, managing 12 projects, capital projects spanning our 3 campuses all summer. So job well done. So thank you.
Is there also the transition to the new software as well?
Yes.
That happened?
There's a number of things that weren't mentioned, but that's
Including Chris.
Yeah.
No, but the entire finance department has to be recognized for a job well done. There were just many summer nights that we were all there. It's warm summer nights, and it was like we were getting ready for a barbecue out back or something. A lot of fun, and we got a lot done. So thank you. Also, on the opening day, on the 26th, when we broke from that session, faculty and staff were able to go back to their buildings and to begin work on the educator evaluation system, on the rollout. So in our opening remarks at a very high level, we spoke to some of the huge initiatives that will be driving our work this year, one of which, of course, is the rollout of the ed evaluation system. So I know that Frank, Terry, and Barbara did a phenomenal job at Pine Hill of working with the faculty at the building on developing SMART goals, and Karen Leduc has done an incredible job of just stepping in and really working with goal development through the educator evaluation system. I'll also highlight we started a new tradition this summer. All 22 system-wide administrators had a retreat off campus. And of course, it was the first time with a lot of new faces. And everyone left their buildings, left their offices. Frank was able to join us. I think it was day 2 or something of work. And Frank cleared his calendar and was there. But what a great opportunity to just sit around, away from all the commotion that can sometimes be on campus, and chat about ideas for the year. So we enjoyed a potluck lunch. And the nice takeaway was that typically we've had cohorts of administrators that have met monthly from the different school districts. And at the end of the day, we decided collectively that that group wants to stay together. And instead of having these separate meetings at the end of every month, have all administrators come together after school hours so that nobody's leaving his or her building, and have the whole group there. And it was so incredible to hear the middle and high school principals saying, not everything necessarily that's discussed at the elementary level touches us. It's not germane to what we do necessarily, but they loved hearing the discourse. So we'll come back together. We have our next admin cabinet meeting on September 19th. So that's and we had the pleasure right before school opening welcoming new fire chief Tim Morrissey here in Sherborn. Phenomenal gentleman who toured the building with Dr. Brown and went around and looked at some of the improvements. And would also like to publicly thank Chief Rick Thompson. Rick is a phenomenal supporter of the schools and has really been instrumental in helping us to define some of our security needs at Pine Hill. And we thank Rick, and we welcome Tim Morrissey, of course. Including your packet is the bullying prevention intervention plan. The state law surrounding the bullying prevention intervention law actually changed at the late spring, early summer, and highlighted in red within the BPIP, we call it the bullying prevention intervention plan. It's literally, the only thing that changed was the definition of staff members. So the legislation changed to include a broader canvas of folks who can be reporters under the bullying law, to include bus drivers, cafeteria workers, coaches, you name it. So that was an appropriate change, and we just wanted to bring that to the attention of the committee, use it as a great opportunity to update the plan, and hopefully, with a favorable vote, be able to post this as our revised plan.
Now, will this be part of the wellness committee, the bullying plan
Yeah.
or program.
It will be, and I actually just, it's funny, Susan, because I just sent out an email to everyone who had, both from all three school committees who expressed interest in being in the wellness committee. It literally was sent out about a half an hour ago, calling for our first organizational meeting
Great.
of the year. So this will be part and parcel of that work.
Okay.
So we're just talking about the, really the third and fourth pages here?
Correct. And then I think we also introduced definitions, Mr. Hess, on the end, page 14.
Okay.
And again, it's just a recapitulation of the terminology
Okay.
around staff.
So now, do we have to vote on it then as with the,
I'd like to, because I'd actually like to resubmit it to the state just so that we remain compliant with having an active plan on file that reflects the statute.
and then as part of the wellness committee, will we, you know, potentially be working on other efforts that support this?
Yeah, what I'd love to do is hear from, so we've invited some administrators from the buildings and would love to hear about how is that actually working.
Yeah, that'd be
You know,
great.
are there things that we need to change, that we can change within the law
Right.
that would work better and ensure the safety of our kids?
Yeah, okay, great.
Any other discussion about these
Yes,
changes?
yes, in terms of this document, just curious the reading. It probably reads right, but it just kind of reads
Yeah, what page you-
interestingly.
What page are you
We're
on?
On page 3, which
Yep.
is, I think, the same as page 14. The staff includes but is not limited to, school staff including but not limited to.
Yeah, it
So
seems
it
redundant.
may need to be like that, but it just,
Yeah.
should it read like
Well,
that?
I can check it against the law and see if that's how it reads. I think we literally extracted it, but if it's redundant, then we'll clean that up.
Did it,
So if there are no other questions regarding the BPEP, we could, take a vote if there's a.
Okay, would someone want to move as amended here?
Yeah,
So
I'll
moved.
move to approve the amendments to the bullying prevention plan.
Second it then.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Continuing on the report, included in your packet is correspondence from my office to Town Administrator Dave Williams dated August 15th, 2013, with multiple CC'd parties, including the Chair of the Sherborn Board of Selectmen, Mr. Hess, Mr. Hook, Business Manager Tague, Ralph Kelly, Peter Gimlet, and Dr. Brown. This concerns the septic system, and indeed in the outfield of the lower fields located at the base of Pine Hill Lane, there are in fact two sinkholes that were brought to our attention, and we wanted by way of this correspondence to determine what the position from the Board of Selectmen would be relative to the safety issue. And so we documented this. I've since been in touch with Mr. Williams, and we are going to there's an agreement to contact the company that does our septic maintenance. As Mr. Hess alluded to, we handle the maintenance of the septic system, and we are quite fine with having that company come out and do sort of an assessment of what the issue or issues may be. And then once we have that assessment, it was Mr. Caruso and Mr. Williams who asked that we report back on that. And of course, we'll report back to the Sherborn School Committee first in terms of what the findings are. But to Mr. Hess's point, this isn't really Pine Hill property. This is Town of Sherborn property. And our fear, of course, is that if this were to become a Title V issue, that it could become a large issue, financially and otherwise. First and foremost is student safety and making sure that users of those fields are safe. So we've actually had steel plates that have been put over the affected areas, and that was at Mr. Williams' request to Mr. Wagner. And so any imminent safety concern has been, we think, triaged, and then we're moving forward with a complete assessment of what the issues may be.
Do you know when that's gonna happen?
Very soon.
Soon,
We've
yeah.
already contacted them. We
So
just
we'd
need
have
to
to-
find out the
I mean,
date.
if we need to figure out capital and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
or
We'll
whatever.
have that concurrent with the
Yeah.
capital discussion, yeah. You know, it's an antiquated system, and there's quite a bit of detail that I've included in the memo to, in a way, memorialize a little bit of the history behind the septic system, so that we're all aware of what's happening there. So we'll certainly keep the committee apprised of that. would also like to just mention to you that we're going to have a Raider Spirit Day on the 20th of September. And today, the Raider Rack opened. The Raider Rack is located at Linquist Commons. And they actually did $1,018 worth of sales. Right, Amy?
Yes, I helped.
You're excited? Everyone was really pumped up, and so we're going to have a Raider Day, and we're looking to potentially have that be every Friday. And we know, and I'm so pleased to see so many kids at Pine Hill adorned with DS attire. So just make a note of that as well. And on the report, I think that really is about it for my part of the report. Are there any questions?
Did you have any tech or accept updates that mentioned?
I did. Back to the agenda. On the agenda, so there was a little bit of confusion with the school committees around that in the spring. So the laws surrounding how collaboratives function, the laws changed in the Commonwealth, and Tech and Accept have to send to the DESE a plan document around how their collaboratives are now compliant with that. And there was a document that we were circulating among the school committees in the spring from Tech, and it seems to have sort of started and stopped in different places with different committees. But long story short, that Tech document was not ready for signature. So when I joined the board this summer and started attending the meetings, neither Tech nor Accept has received back clearance on their plan documents from the DESE. So when they get the all clear on their reports, then they need to be brought back to our 3 school committees for signature. So the one issue is the plan document. The second issue is that we need the minutes of all of our school committee meetings to reflect that as superintendent, I'm being asked to serve as the board member to both Tech and Accept, and they need those minutes fairly quickly. So that's part of their compliance with the law, is that with school districts, the way we're set up, they need a favorable vote from the 3 school committees. So we did that last week with the region, next week with Dover, and we're hoping tonight with Sherborn. I've already begun attending the meetings, obviously, and there are some elements to the meetings that will affect us, and I'll certainly bring that back. And any board members are absolutely welcome to attend those meetings. It's just who has the voting capacity at the meeting.
Is
And
it just, we have one vote? That was what was different, right?
Right, because what happened, Mrs. Hanlon, is that we have 3 school districts, and we're being recognized under one dues structure. So rather than paying our dues in triplicate to those collaboratives, we are only paying one dues to each of those collaboratives. If we want to pay 3 dues, that's fine, and we can have 3 votes. But it became a disproportionate voting block for what is one school system. We're paying 1 dues.
So what is there to vote on today then?
We just need the minutes to reflect that as a school committee, you would like for the superintendent to be the delegate, your delegate to those meetings, and the voting member to those both collaboratives.
Okay, and then you're the voting member, then Greg is the representative.
And he can absolutely go,
Yeah.
you know.
So I went to one meeting, I got a couple of emails that you forwarded, I don't know that I'm on their list, but I went to the one meeting where I said, Karen, so what am I supposed to do? Go to all their meetings, or?
You absolutely can, but just know that I'll also be there and be able to report out. But I know we have other school committee members who really enjoy going to the meetings.
Okay, but I thought the idea was that you were gonna go when a vote was needed, like the meeting I went to, there was no, there was no vote called for.
Right. I definitely have to be there when votes are called. There's no doubt about it. But I have all of the dates in my calendar just to put placeholders there,
Okay.
because some of what's being discussed, particularly at Tech with the Commonwealth Virtual High School, is really apropos to
That's the
what's
meeting-
going on.
That's the meeting that I went to.
Yeah.
So Frank, do you want me to go to these meetings and report back?
Yes, please, but I think it's good to have an extra set of eyes and ears there, particularly with, they have a wide-ranging area that they cover, aside from professional development, then this new online learning is going to be something we should be up on.
And I'll be there for every vote, Greg, but if you and I want to if you're not able to go to a meeting or I am, maybe we can just sort of cross-pollinate on that.
Now, is there somebody from, doesn't Dawn go from?
Dawn goes from Dover pretty
anyone else
faithfully.
from-
Lauren Bach sometimes goes from the region, sometimes hit or miss.
So we need to move,
Yeah,
move that Superintendent Gillespie, the tech representative for the board,
To the board.
to the board, from Pine Hill?
Sherborn.
From the Sherborn School Committee.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Second, anyone?
I kind of drafted it as slightly different. I don't know if this is more encompassing, closer to what it is, that the superintendent to be the delegate and the voting member for the district, and to have a member from the Sherborn School Committee attend meetings and report back to the school committee.
Right, and Greg
So
is the
should-
one that we want
So
to,
should that be what it says as the vote,
I don't
as a
think
The
nomination?
second half probably is not.
Yeah, I don't
First
think
half
so.
sounded really good.
That's fair.
We don't need to
Alright.
vote on having someone from our committee go.
And we just want to make sure, Mr. Hook, that in the motion, we mention both tech and accept by name, because I need
Oh,
to send those,
okay.
both collaboratives need to be named.
all right, so,
Okay.
Maybe
Well, if you want, yeah, Price wants to read that again, I can.
yeah, you want to read that back, Frank?
Okay,
I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters. Thanks, Amy.
to make a nomination that the superintendent be the delegate to the Tech and Accept Collaborative as the voting member for the Dover Sherburne School District,
No,
Sherborn.
Sherborn School.
Sherburne School District, and all this, Sherburne School District.
Second.
Sherborn School Committee.
Me.
Maybe, because you're representing the body.
Okay, so, any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, so,
The only other thing included also in your packet dated August 21st is a memo to me from IT Director Gene Conkey. And this was brought up at the admin retreat this summer, was the notion that we really should be bringing to school committee anytime any equipment, textbooks, et cetera, anything we're looking to declare obsolete. And we've done this pretty faithfully with textbooks and that kind of thing, and particularly at the region is where we see a lot of these come through. But I would like for the administrators to begin doing this. Things that are purchased with taxpayer dollars should be reflected as being declared obsolete when they are. And so if it's the will of the committee, we'll continue to draft these kinds of memos when we need a vote around something like this.
okay, what would be the, I mean, aside from sending to a recycler, is there any country, group or something that could make some use of these that you could donate them to, or?
So a lot of the computers, Karen, Chris and I, we had a conversation with Gene and confirmed that we, as it were, for lack of a better term, we sort of cannibalize a lot of the equipment and we use a lot of parts, whatever we can. So you may look at something and say, wow, why are we disposing of 12 laptops or something like that? We've already utilized as much as we can from those laptops, so they're pretty much rendered useless. But one of the requests that came from the regional school committee was, when we declare textbooks obsolete, might we look for a vendor who might even give us a couple dollars for a book or something like that, and why not? And we actually entered some of the ISBN numbers for books that we declared obsolete last week, and the vendors came back quickly, all three, and said, yeah, there's no interest at all. And the books, we were totally rejected.
So much per pound, right?
What's that? Yeah, I was-
Thereby verifying that they are in fact obsolete.
yeah, that's right. It's our good quality control feature. So we provide this to you with the hope that you'd be able to act favorably, so that Gene can go ahead and remove some of this equipment.
Can I just ask, if you mentioned because you should know what taxpayer money is going, is there then a differentiation between things potentially purchased by DSEF grants? I know that gets very complicated, I just wondered if that was.
So one of the things, I don't know how faithful we've been about this, but we should really every spring bring forward and ask for the Sherborn School Committee to accept all gifts from CSA, from DSEF, and anything in the form of a donation. And then it becomes within the purview of this committee to then subsequently be able to declare said donations as obsolete. So there's kind of a chain of custody around it, and we should do that.
So it doesn't matter where it came from, it's just.
Once
declaring
you
it
accept it, it's kind of within your purview.
Okay, so we need a motion to allow the administration to dispose of this equipment.
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed?
And the very last item on my list here was the Language-Based Strategies Initiative, and it's not intended to be last because of any kind of relative significance. It's in fact very significant. I want to thank Special Ed Administrator Terry Green and her counterparts in Dover and at the region, Marla Colarusso and Jerry Schimmel, who have partnered with the administration for months in planning a language-based initiative. And we have used, through Karen's great authoring of our grants, Title I and Title II money to be able to partner with the staff development component of the Landmark School in Beverly, which is a school to which many students wind up matriculating when students have in fact language-based learning deficits. And what's wonderful about Landmark is they have an entire staff development arm of their operation, and it's headed up by a gentleman by the name of Dan Ahern. Several months ago, we entered conversation and dialogue with Dan and his senior trainer, Ann Larson, about coming in and offering training not only to our special educators at Pine Hill, at Chickering, in the middle school and the high school, but also to regular ed teachers in order to really begin to define and to refine, in some instances, the strategies for working with kids who have some language-based learning deficits. So one of the things we've struggled with as a school system is that students who sometimes present with language-based issues at the elementary level will often matriculate well enough through the elementary schools, and then they wind up being out of district placed. And we see that with a troubling frequency at the region. And we wanted to be able to, number one, in the best interest of doing what's right by kids, which is keep them in district, because that's what's best for them, in the least restrictive environment to provide a free and appropriate public education. Certainly there are students whose needs are so pronounced that we need to look at alternative educational settings, but that shouldn't be where we go first. And so we've made this commitment across the 3 districts so that when Terry Green's working with families at Pine Hill, she can, with full faith and confidence, say, you know what, I know that when your child gets to the middle school, there'll be a platform of support, as opposed to saying, well, when your kid gets to middle school, I don't really know what that's going to look like. You know, that the content, the curriculum becomes very rigorous, and more often than not, students have gone to other schools. And we've successfully brought kids back to the districts this year from out of district, and that will become sort of what we're hoping is the new trend. So we have a number fewer than 5 students who are returning to the districts who would have been at placements where arguably they're not with their peers from Dover and Sherborn, and with a significant, obviously, price tag to the taxpayers. So first and foremost, what's best for kids, and then we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we're protecting taxpayers' dollars. And so that's a full-fledged, and we've actually hired a special educator with a concentration in language-based learning deficits. She happens to be EEE certified in Linda Mood Bell, Orton Gillingham, and Wilson reading for the region. So now we really have a fairly robust safety net for students that are coming into the region. So, thank you. Thank you, Terry Green.
Okay, so is it Principal Brown's turn here, or do you have something else?
Oh, I think we've covered it. Thank you.
Are we done with all of
Dr.
this?
Brown?
David?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Well,
Karen.
excuse me,
Karen.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry,
No worries.
went in the wrong direction.
No worries.
Thank you so much. Over the past 8 weeks in the summer, as Mr. Bliss had mentioned, a lot was accomplished, and I was afforded a tremendous view of the quality programming and excellent staff that is in place here in Dover, Sherborn, and particularly at the Sherborn Pine Hill School, and walking around with Dr. Brown and Mr. McGordy and then Dr. Green, to be able to see the excellence that's evidenced at Pine Hill. So that was a great treat for me, and it gave me a running start for the fall. So I am pleased that Mr. Bliss and Ms. Tague were there to answer all of the multitude of questions that I might have had about programming and, oh yeah, how's that go? So I was able to get a great understanding of the school system, so I'm thankful for that. As we've gotten up and running, we've implemented the educator evaluation protocol, And in order to ensure a consistent message across all of the 4 buildings, I was instrumental in working with those administrators in developing the training for our educators. And in addition, the software training in Baseline Edge, which is the platform where our educators will enter their goals. It's a software that's web-based, and also where our mini observations will be recorded of all of our personnel. So it's a great time to be in the Dover Sherborn Public Schools. I actually will do the training for the Pine Hill staff tomorrow, right after the in-service day. I've met with some curriculum leaders, all of the new leaders to the curriculum lens. That's where I feel my most comfortable, is to work with those leaders who are leading our educators in developing that fine next steps in the Understanding by Design curriculum template and developing those assessments. Certainly worked with the superintendent to assure the success of the new administrators, not necessarily here, but through the assistant principal here, but at the other parts of the region. Completed those federal grants that Mr. Bliss mentioned in order to be able to fund that language-based strategies teacher. And then working on ahead to develop MCAS presentations for each of the 3 school committees. So that's what you'll see in the October month. But certainly have felt welcomed, and certainly by the school committee here, and was impressed by the opening remarks when all of the staff was together. And I know 2 of the members of the school committee were there for those opening remarks. It is about the people and the places, Mr. Bliss said, and you can't do better than where we are right now. So thank you, and thank you, and thank you to the staff and to all of you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question? Since
Yes.
you mentioned coordinated homeschool education plans, what is our responsibility as a school district for students who choose to be educated at home?
The family comes forward. They must meet the requirements to show that they're, have the amount of time necessary in order to instruct their children according to whatever grade they are chronologically in. They choose their own curriculum materials, but that plan comes forward to me. I review it. I have conversations with the families. They'll give us an end-of-the-year progress report, but the law is clear for homeschool families that they are the educational person for that family, and we can only consult with them, but we do get to approve their plan.
Okay, and Christine, could you have a financial report for us?
Sure. The year-end fiscal year preliminary closing, obviously, it's not totally completed until the annual audit is done, but we came basically $650 as far as regular ed and in-district sped within budget, which represents not even 0.1%. So I think that's pretty scary. Variance is basically comprised of 2 things: $42,000 in salary variance, and we had anticipated that, so we had accompanying operating expense variances of a positive $41,000. That basically offset that. I explained most of the major variances, and I won't bother to read this. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain those questions. The other area of significant turnback was in the out-of-district. I've combined the 2 Pine Hill and regional out-of-district into one budget for reporting purposes. And as you can see, there was a $251,000 turnback to the town. Of that $251,000, approximately $150,000 was attributable to circuit breaker. We budget circuit breaker at the Pine Hill. We anticipated a 40% reimbursement rate, and it actually came in at 72%. Historically, over a 5-year period, it's been anywhere from 40 to 72%. The last 2 years, however, it has been around 72%.
And when did you find that out? When did you learn what it was?
It's usually not till November of the fiscal year we're in, of what the actual, because they have to actually get all the claims information in, and we really don't know. there may even be a final distribution in the fourth quarter of the fiscal year we're in. So we're estimating what we think the reimbursement will be, and it is based on legislative approval. As far as, it could be 40, it could be
Okay.
70.
So you'll find out this coming November what the reimbursement is gonna be for,
FY 14. And then during the FY 15 process, it's part of the state budget process, which we really don't know until late spring.
do you have a, just out of curiosity, a sense of the number less than 5, the kids that are returning, what kind of savings that's gonna be? The kids were at Landmark or wherever they were and that are coming back to the system, do we have?
Well, in this particular instance, as far as FY 13 is concerned, we also, some of the savings that we identify is because of the transportation.
Right.
We were successful in negotiating with Accept to transport 4 students to one particular placement. And that, in effect, was budgeted for this year, and those are the,
Wow,
So we had,
I see. So you're gonna save on that transportation, but that's sort of gone out the window because those kids are gonna be part of that transportation.
correct,
Okay.
but that's surely the tuition dollars, and then it's a combination of placements, but notwithstanding other things that may happen in terms of other move-ins, et cetera, safe to say, $150,000, $200,000 worth of potential savings.
Does it behoove us then when we're doing our budget to calculate this not at the 40% level, but at the 70% level?
may I respond to that?
Sure, yeah.
I think last time around, Mr. Hook, you had mentioned about a reserve fund, okay? This is our reserve fund, that 30% differential, that's all we have. So, for example, this year we budgeted $235,000 in circuit breaker against the general fund. Anything that comes in over and above that, and we're anticipating maybe $400,000, that's all we have in reserve for an out-of-district that may come in from the time we did our budget back in March of last year through the entire school year, which ends in June of this year. So I would suggest strongly, most communities use that as a reserve for unknowns related to out-of-district. Financially, the superintendent and I as well was substantially against budgeting circuit breaker the way that the town of Sherborn does it. Because of that, there are no cushions. So if you have a costly case come in, you have nowhere else to go. Once you've basically gone through the entire circuit breaker reimbursement.
Am I misunderstanding maybe? I thought that money from the circuit breaker did not come back to the school's budget, but went to the town's budget?
Correct.
That's where that's where the costs are, though. So they'll go back, and that is literally the only window that the town has, because if we cut that close to the bone with the budget, and then you have $150,000 placement, where do you go? And from the town's perspective, where do you go?
But it's earmarked some place downstairs in a special fund, right, that it goes back into.
Correct.
So it's the safety, I mean, it's the reserve fund, but only for a particular period of time, though, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so only if while you have that, if something happens, you can accommodate that. So, not to belabor the point, but to finally see if we can sort of establish a reserve fund, advisory says we want you to budget net a circuit breaker. Do you have to, or who's really telling, so it's different than how Dover does it, but, so how could we sort of finally come to an agreement that it makes sense to have a reserve fund that you have access to for more than just an academic year or less?
Well, circuit breaker, there is malleability there's flexibility within circuit breaker, so you're not confined within, you can actually use circuit breaker over a longer period of time.
2 years.
2 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Except that we don't hold
We
it.
don't. We
No,
don't.
because we have to turn it back, that's the problem. Don't we?
Turn it back to.
Well, it stays,
Free cash.
goes
If,
back to
if
the
ultimately at the expiration and you haven't exhausted the circuit breaker at the end of the 24-month, the tolling period, then,
So,
then,
It
yeah.
never comes back to us to begin
so
with.
you do have it for 24 months.
Correct. It's been the town's policy in the last 2 years. It's really only a matter of what the town policy has been to budget net of circuit breaker.
So if we had a reserve fund, we'd have to put that in our budget and then get it basically passed by the town, right? And they would never pass that. Is that correct?
And the difficulty there is then you're truly within a 12-month tolling period of your fiscal year, because you don't have the flexibility of doing anything beyond 12 months as a legal body. Circuit breaker allows you a little more malleability. Flexibility, yeah.
But so could the town though then say, we don't have the money? Like if we said you said there's a little bit of malleability, so it doesn't necessarily have to be used for an out-of-district placement or something. Suppose it's something like the septic system.
No,
It has to.
no, it absolutely has to be tied back to special education.
Definitely has to be tied back to,
Absolutely.
okay.
Yep. So it's, you know, to the point, if we weren't budgeting net of circuit breaker, you could in fact realize you could have a little more of a comfort zone there. Because if you are that close and then a $150,000 student comes into the system, town, that's it, you have to come up with $150,000.
Right, that makes sense.
So the cushion is not the circuit breaker amount, the cushion is between what you budget, so you budget net, you budget for 40% reimbursement, and it comes back 60, 20% your cushion.
That's correct.
Correct. It's a net.
We'd like to have it be 100%.
Got it.
Is that all accurate, Terry? That's
you all set? Okay, Dr. Brown?
In an effort to be efficient, I'm going to skim over some things that we've talked about already. But I'd like to start by acknowledging one of our first grade teachers in the audience, Cindy Sidman. Hello. We had an immensely positive and smooth opening to the school year. And I wanted to acknowledge that we welcomed, our teachers were poised to greet 368 students. In addition to our new kindergarten students, we had 21 new registrations of students grades 1 through 5. And essentially for every student that moved out or transferred, we received 3 students in their place. So it was nice to welcome many new families. This is a bit redundant, but thank you to the school committee for your support and all the capital projects. Our school physically looks terrific. Our custodians and Frank Kelly worked really hard this summer, and Chris, so thank you for that. It's all come together. And Michael Lester, I'd like to recognize publicly in his overseeing of the Sherborn Energy Grant. He has been a diligent communicator and spot checker of the lighting project that is literally still going on. When we left the building, one of the vendors was still checking some very small little details around the building. So,
So that's just well finished?
I'm sorry, did I say less?
Okay.
Thank you, Lesser. Thank you. Sorry, Michael. Thank you, Superintendent Bliss, for mentioning Pam Ritchie receiving the Pine Hill, on behalf of the school district, being the rep for Pine Hill for the Unsung Hero Award. That was very deserved, so thank you for recognizing that. And I also would like to acknowledge, and I didn't put this in my report, but our staff members and some community members came together at the start of the school year to honor former school librarian Carol DeFusco, who passed away over the summer. So there's, some of you were there, there's a nice dedication in our school library in her memory. We are having a fabulous time spending the nearly $27,000 awarded to us from last spring's DSEF award grant. We purchased 30 additional iPads and a mobile cart, and several of our classrooms are going to be outfitted with Apple TV to afford interactivity between teacher iPads and the interactive whiteboard, or teacher iPads and student iPads in the interactive whiteboard. So that's how we spent a good portion of our grant award. Our FLES program, our foreign language at the elementary school program, has kicked off with an amazing vibrance. And I wanted to recognize, I know this was in your report, Superintendent, but to thank Karen LeDuc for her coordination and support of the FLES program as we work for good articulation across both the Chickering and Pine Hill schools. Specifically at Pine Hill, our kindergarten teachers have been very receptive, supportive, and welcoming of the collaboration with Laura Roma, our Spanish teacher, and our students are eating out of the palm of her hand. It's amazing to watch. Amazing. Several teachers worked over the summer to enhance curriculum instruction and/or assessment initiatives for our building, but I wanted to specifically acknowledge Jim Carnes, our formerly known as our PE teacher, is now our health and PE teacher, and he and I worked over the summer to align the state curriculum standards for health in a K-5 curriculum that is going to be implemented at Pine Hill through his instruction starting this year. I wanted to recognize that our Pine Hill teachers, beginning next week, will be embarking in a big professional development initiative that's building-based, specific to Pine Hill, to strengthen and enhance our instruction of reading. And we're doing that through consultation of teachers, teachers for teachers, outside consultants who'll be working with us for a total of 10 days through the school year to instruct teachers in whole group, small group, and individual coaching kinds of formats. We're really excited about that. In addition, as I believe Dr. LeDuc will perhaps speak of maybe throughout the year, but beginning tomorrow, our Pine Hill faculty, in addition to the Chickering faculty, will be embarking on what will be an 18-hour professional development endeavor to strengthen our conceptual understanding of how to develop curriculum through understanding by design. So we're really excited about that. We're hosting that tomorrow. We'll trade off between the two schools. Just want to make sure I hit on the salient things. Superintendent Bliss mentioned 53 new staff members to Dover Sherborn this year. 7 of them are at Pine Hill, and I would like to publicly recognize Judy Atanisov, our new school psychologist, Jill Fedor, our school nurse / rock star, Frank McGordy, assistant principal, Laura Roma, Spanish teacher, Natalie Shea, occupational therapist, Annie Wardwell, grade 3 teacher in a long-term sub position, and not listed because she's not new, but she is an official hire now. Marianne Bouchard, who was a long-term sub for us last year, is now officially a 3rd grade teaching assistant. I believe most of the other things in my notes were touched upon. I would like to acknowledge, just in case you hear any public feedback, we have 10 school buses that transport children to and fro Pine Hill every day, one of them being our bus from Boston, the other 9 being local Sherborn routes. Of those 9 Sherborn buses, 3 of the drivers are drivers in training right now due to retirement, staff turnover, and in one case, a bus driver who's out with a medical situation right now. So the bus company has been in very close communication with us, but occasionally there's been a little oopsie with the substitute driver, so I wanted you all to be aware of that, just in case you hear feedback on the street.
We're also providing some professional development for the drivers. We are going to provide EpiPen training to all the drivers, which is a concern that was brought to our attention the other day. So our bus vendor is extremely responsive and has identified a date during which our nurses will actually be deployed to work with them. So, and we also do bullying training annually with the bus drivers, so we'll also do that as well. So Conley Bus has been a great partner with us, and I'm sure they're in regular communication.
More than once daily. They're
Superb.
excellent.
Thank you.
Excuse me, You mentioned lunch, you do about 100 to 110 per day. What's that compared to other years, as far as lunch sales?
The lunch counts at all buildings are up.
They're up?
Yeah, they're up this year. And I asked Janelle Madden, is that just sort of a beginning of the year honeymoon? Or is that, and she said we're typically up at the beginning, but there's really, the numbers are very impressive this year, so that's a good sign. I don't think we were entertaining enough.
Must be looking for the meeting next door.
What time is the school council meeting?
The school council meeting is at 3:15, and we meet in the assistant principal's office.
Well, actually, I have an update here from Janelle Madden. I asked her to send a little something tonight. Poor thing, she's sick, but she emailed. We're participating. I said, "What's new and happening?" She said, "We're participating in the Harvest of the Month program through the Mass Farm to School initiative. Vegetable trading cards and the I Tried It stickers are becoming popular. The featured vegetable is local tomatoes, most of which we're procuring from Ward's Berry Farm in Sharon. And we're also serving peaches from Western Mass." So she was pleased to report out on some of those initiatives right out of the gate at the beginning of the year.
Okay, all set then?
All set, unless you have any
Okay,
questions.
thank you. Okay, so next on the agenda, we have the format of regular school committee meetings. And some people want to discuss that and maybe perhaps some special workshop meetings. So some of you have something to suggest on this?
Is this the right time?
Yeah.
Let's just hand out a few things.
So Susan has a quick handout. I think that we were just sort of looking at ways to potentially increase the efficiency, and especially for people who have to go to multiple school committee meetings, if there's a way so that we can optimize our time here. And also then give time for the members of the school committee more of an opportunity to have a real discussion, an in-depth discussion. These meetings seem to be much more of they're very business oriented. It's a report out, it's actionable items, vote here, what's on the next agenda. And less time for thorough discussion of some key issues, one of which would be the budget. But I'm sure that we can identify others. So as it notes here, the goals are just to decrease the length of the regular meetings, although tonight we seem to be doing a really good job.
Yeah, I was thinking that, yeah.
Is there a need to report out, for instance, perhaps there's a month where, Terry, you don't have anything specific, and so maybe you don't need to be here. I mean, if you want to be here, you're welcome to. We'd always enjoy having you, but that perhaps there are ways that you could maybe report out or be more specific in our discussions concerning special ed every other month, or something that would work better with you. Similar with Christine, perhaps we can create it so that the budget can be done earlier in the meetings. We can focus all those items, and then perhaps you could leave earlier. Just trying to make it so that it works better for everybody involved.
Well, last year we had tried just eliminating like 3 or 4 meetings, and I think we didn't feel comfortable with that. We wound up scheduling back meetings, and so we were thinking, well, maybe this way, if we have some focused meetings, maybe instead of eliminating 3 meetings, maybe we kind of think about 3 meetings, monthly meetings that are a focus of some sort, maybe 2 subjects, and then we don't do like, not that we don't want to hear about the updates and stuff, but maybe we just don't do that, and it kind of mixes things up a bit, changes the format a little bit, so it's not as rigorous, and it's a little bit more engaging. And it gives, I think, us all an opportunity to hear in depth on certain subjects. So, I mean, these were just ideas that Ann and I were going to want to throw out there, see what you guys thought.
I agree with a lot with the idea, but for instance, like this evening, not to put you on the spot, what would you change about this evening, even though it's been reasonably efficient?
Well, this is probably one of those meetings where you do need all the updates and stuff, so this would be more of a regular meeting, so to speak. At the end of the year in June, we talked about maybe mixing it up a bit, having you know, the more regular status update, you know, these types of meetings, and then once in a while having a different type of a meeting. So tonight's meeting actually would be the way it would be most of the time. And, you know, we have so many new people, it's also, you know,
Different.
trying a new agenda, new format, so we have to get the feel of that as well.
I think perhaps an option, although I know it's difficult to get all this stuff out, but if we had this earlier, we could submit, maybe have more time to go through it, we could submit questions and get those responses back from one person as opposed to wait until the meeting to ask all your questions. If there's a couple of things, you could maybe submit questions. But I don't
You
know
mean
if
in-
it's-
That's
Could
just
they get
where
us out
it's really tough because because of the way the meetings stack up, so we tried, especially at the beginning because of the way some of the meetings fell, to get it out, but we're right up against it to get the packet out, to make sure that it's complete and,
Okay.
and we tried through the central office report to just house everything under, the similar look and feel,
Yeah.
just to help people, so you're not sort of fishing through
Helps, yeah.
a wad of paperwork,
Greg, in response to that also, I think that some of the questions that we bring out in the discussion that we have is some of the things that are important that we do actually have here as opposed to, having that in those questions answered early on. Because there still might be somebody else that has a question, and it's good to hear that. In terms of what I was just thinking about as you were talking, how one of these things could work is that when you get closer to that December, January timeframe when the budget comes in, that there you focus more on those types of topics and keep the reports a little shorter. It gives us that venue for the voting aspects as well, so we can have those discussions if they're there, but keep the the informational types of components to the meeting.
When we know we have one topic, like, budget is huge, it would be, and I think we'd like to bring this up with each of the 3 school committees, it seems like it would be okay to just say, the topic item for this particular meeting is the FY15 budget, like, end of story, because we know to go through, a multi-million-dollar budget, it's so much more than a 2-hour meeting, so the notion of trying to stack other things on there, it would be very helpful, I think, for everyone in terms of even having a greater comfort level with the budget and having the transparent conversation that everyone so craves, to spend some time on that. And yet with the committees, it tends to, we tend to put out some other things on those agendas sometimes, and it just really makes it long.
So you dismiss some of the reports that are meaningful but not substantive necessarily to focus just on budget, something like that, so you mean?
Sure, we could submit a brief, report, and then if there's anything around that, maybe Mr. Hess would say, we'll allow literally 10 minutes if there's anything in that packet, but at the end of 10 minutes, boom, we're moving into the budget so that we don't get into it's up to Mr. House's chair.
And I think that sometimes as you have things that you want to get across, you can pick and choose which people you might want to have come to a meeting too, so that we don't take their time.
Yep.
Because they're doing this 3 times, we're doing it once here. I think that might be some judgment you have to make. Of course, there's always the time then the person isn't there, we say, well, what about this? And then you have to go and search for the question, the answer to the question later.
Yeah, no, that would be very helpful, and, having said that, I don't know if we'll see Chris back here until June, but Chris will want to be here. But that's helpful to be able to say, like, I know Terry Green comes every month, and she comes as a team member and likes to come, and thank you, Anne, for saying it's okay, obviously, even if there's nothing on the agenda, but we can work on that through the team and see if there's really anything that, if it requires all of us to be here.
Well, for instance, let's say just for instance, we decided in October to do, the next meeting is gonna be a special topic or a couple of special topics, then if you had until November to do the reports and the types of things that take a lot of time, and you're always right up to it's a bigger window.
Yep.
And I'm not, and I know that a lot of times you wait till the last, everybody waits till the end anyway, but maybe if you had a longer period of time to do the status report, and it's not just every 4 weeks,
True.
maybe that would help with what you're saying about the reporting, especially the status reports.
Absolutely.
Because you feel like there's an opportunity to make it more, consolidated or useful, and then it frees up other time for, headier subjects or, evening talking about a couple of subjects that are really, hot and
Right.
critical. And we can get into it more in depth.
Yeah.
And let's face it, with the budget, we always have to schedule many meetings. And so maybe we need to try to get away from targeting a monthly meeting for the budget discussion and maybe just have any supplemental stuff at a monthly meeting and do the in-depth budget in a separate meeting. 'Cause I think that's always what happens anyway.
Yeah, I mean, so you
Depending
think
on
of the
the
month
year.
of December, is there really any, I mean, there's always stuff going on in the buildings, but having some kind of down and dirty summary is probably quite sufficient and doesn't really warrant a lot of discussion around it when we have a multi-million-dollar budget
Right.
against which we're really constrained.
Isn't December the time we have to vote on the initial budget though?
Yeah, typically.
Yeah, we
No,
have
the
to do it
first
early.
draft.
Okay.
First pass.
But I mean, the debate really is
Afterwards.
ongoing.
Yeah,
Well,
Right.
not to
Yeah.
lengthen the meeting, but the debate always tends to be around the cuts from that initial budget, which I think are misleading. I'd rather have a more meaningful discussion about, in terms of what happens in December, I'd rather have a more meaningful discussion about that initial budget, as opposed to going through all the math. If that was more accurate, I guess you'd say, then you'd have less to deal with later.
but that's,
It-
isn't that the way budgets are always done? I mean, even in the corporate world, I mean, everybody starts out like this, and first draft, second draft, and then you have your discussion. I don't know if you can ever get away from that.
Well, is there, in October, what do you envision as far as the budget process from your office?
So what we were hoping to bring forward was, we were hoping to be able to convene the Pine Hill the Capital Building Committee and be able to have discourse around some of the capital items. Because what we're typically doing in October, the business office is prepping for the release of the budget materials to the budget makers around the school system. So at every principal, every headmaster, every director, and that typically kicks off in the month of October. So the hope was, if we could get our arms and our minds a little bit around the capital piece of it, we'd have a nice, while everything else is happening and people are building the budgets out in the field, at least if the school committees could take on the topic around capital, I think it would be a nice segue into the process.
So if we look near the end of September as having a capital
Right.
meeting, okay, and then October, does it look like the end of October, because our meeting is early in October,
Right.
or the beginning of November, we could perhaps have a budget workshop meeting? Would you be ready enough to have something for us to sit down and start to take a look?
No,
No?
not that soon, because the budget manuals would go out in late October, mid to late October to budget makers, correct?
And the other issue this year is every single contract is up that affects the FY15 budget. I mean, I'm just saying, that's just a reality.
And we're also going to ask budget makers to literally say, please just don't look at a line and because it was $5,000 last year and that's what it is this year, please look at and justify and defend everything you're asking for so that we can bring forward, to Greg's point, so we can bring forward more of like putting our very best foot forward instead of the kind of, well, can't this one be knocked by $500 here and $1,000 here, and literally say to Terry and to Barbara, build these budgets from the ground up, and take a hard look at what budgets to actuals have been.
But if we could go, increase and decrease as we were going through the negotiations, I would think that would work. I think the problem is that we always start at a certain point, we know it's gonna go down. So if we knew that if things changed, if we had, our best
Several
estimate.
different scenarios.
Yeah, well, yeah, you could have different scenarios and, maybe do a little more homework, but if you had your best numbers and as you go along in the process, you're allowed to increase for whatever reason because you estimated wrong. then I'd be all in favor of let's get the best estimate possible.
So,
It just doesn't ever go that way. It always goes this way.
in timing, so you wouldn't be talking till the November meeting before we would have a preliminary look at the budget?
With the November meeting. Generally, it's been December.
Yeah, that's where you.
Okay, well, then we might have to look in December of actually having 2 meetings, because we're gonna get it, you know, the first draft, so to speak, and then we might wanna have, some sort of study group afterwards to sort of take a look at it, massage it, talk about it among ourselves.
But I think that part of it, though, is I think that last year we said that we would have loved to have had some preliminary discussions, not even necessarily with the physical budget in front of us, but just having some discussions about what might the budget look like, or what are things that we're thinking about, so that we don't just dive right in, that we sort of walk more gently into it.
You know what might be a good catalyst for that is to take a look at, and Terry, Barbara, and Frank have done a great job of really looking at the staffing and the enrollment report. That's been through like 6 iterations over the summer to just make that it's a duplex document now, but there's fodder there for a lot of discussion, clearly, because we've really made sure that that is an entire encapsulation of all employees in the building, and that might be an interesting conversation. It's the staffing enrollment report, and it looks at previous few years, this year, how many classes, how many sections, and now we've broken out OT, PT. I think they're ready to mark my email as spam or something at the building, because I keep sending this saying, can't we add this, can't we add that, let's make this document more complete. But to the extent that it speaks to the largest part of the budget, might be an interesting
I think that's a good
discussion.
I mean, let's face it, it all comes down to staffing, really, the big numbers.
But I think that the other thing is that we've all been focusing on budget right now, but I would also love to have meetings that focus on what's happening in the classroom. So that it would be really nice. I'd love to hear, for instance, from like the kindergarten teachers, how did the first full year of full day work? Are the first grade teachers seeing the obvious benefits or some clear benefits? I'd love to hear more about, maybe the UBD training or some, things that are going on that are dynamic and exciting, that talks about the actual education. I don't want to just have the school committee focus on the budget, because that's just.
I think that's an example. 'Cause
Well, no, it was, but I'm saying that I think that may be the why it might make sense to have subject-specific meetings, but then some more of these, as we say, small additional, like we'll say, we're gonna meet for an hour, maybe from 7:30 to 8:30. And towards that, I'd like to ask, what are we legally obligated, or who are we legally obligated to have those meetings? Obviously, they're open meetings, and they need to be in a place that's accessible, but in terms of administrative precedence, because we're trying to also do this so that we can, to ease your workloads, not add. We might add a little bit more meeting time for us, but we don't want to add.
Yeah,
more for.
It may be interesting, so we were chatting about, with Karen and others around the October, so if we're thinking of the October agenda, I know Karen's working with the buildings to try and put together an overview of MCAS. We have those scores earlier, so let's get that discussion maybe done and have that digested, because we have the results, so normally that would be kind of in November, and then it's backing up, sort of dangerously close to, budget. And then we're working on a template, it's not yet to the buildings, but it looks at sort of a summary document of a kindergarten and of the graduating classes that had sort of the 3/4 day model, and then what happened with the full day K. And this is kind of press news release to the but I worked on that sort of over the weekend, and I'd like to be able to roll that out to the building. So if we can put something like that together, that might, in October, might be able to give a nice view of kindergarten, MCAS scores. Those are kind of big topics that, in advance of any budget, and we'll be able to do capital maybe. That's a lot, for a meeting.
Okay, and that is on our agenda to figure out the agenda for the next meeting. So aside from those 3 items, does anyone here have anything they particularly want to cover during our next
So
meeting?
does this mean that, does this mean that we're not gonna do status type meetings?
Not necessarily,
I mean,
no.
or
But
have we
we-
decided that?
But we certainly wouldn't have one between now in October, I don't think. October meeting, would we?
I'm thinking of, when I said October, I meant the October meeting.
Right.
You know, on the preset meeting that's already on the calendar. Maybe we don't, you know, I was saying, for example, in October, we don't do all the status updates, we skip all that, and we focus on 3 subjects or something.
I think that's what we're
So do
saying.
we want it, do we all agree that we wanna do that? Is everybody, I'm just wondering if everybody agrees, because,
By status updates, you mean most of this?
yeah, yeah, and, yeah.
So it'll be capital MCAS kindergarten? Is that,
3 meetings.
That's pretty significant. I mean,
Yeah,
that's a meeting.
and if we could have the kindergarten teachers, or one of them, or attend,
What do you think, Dr. Brown?
Forgo the superintendent's report, the budget report, the assistant superintendent's report, the principal's report, is that essentially?
yeah, in the next meeting, and not that we don't want it, but, you know, save it for the November meeting, and then do more of that.
I'd still like to see a little, you know, a
Yeah.
written blurb. It just doesn't need to
Little blurb.
necessarily
So get
be,
it
yeah.
written.
Or
So
just,
short.
or just a shortened
Shortened
version of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, just,
You know, here
That's
are the
great.
key
Yeah.
points of what happened.
Keep it to 1 page.
10 minutes.
and,
No, don't present it at all.
yeah, Greg
Don't
was
present it,
saying,
we can
just
read it.
send out the report,
But
and
then
unless you have questions, no,
The
have
it
at
in
large
your
doesn't.
Yeah.
Don't.
right,
Or-
yeah, right, unless there's a question. Is that,
Yeah, and we're actually using the MCAS template. Dr. Leduc's been working on the MCAS template from, we're gonna test your memory now, from the Strategic Planning State of the Schools Report. Do you remember that, Greg? There's a page on there that takes a snapshot of MCAS scores. It looks at some area district scores, but it's a nice down and dirty, and it will be backed up hopefully with a few slides.
that'd be great,
Less is more.
yeah.
Always.
okay, well, why don't we plan that to be the general template for the next meeting then?
That would work.
So Ed and I were just kind of rambling back and forth on something, and really apologize, but, you know, in terms of that reporting out, and I think one of the things that's important about the reporting out is that this is one of the mechanisms for the audience at large to hear what's going on in the building. So I think Frank said it, you know, maybe take that 10 minutes, or maybe you said it, Steve, I don't remember, but take maybe 10 minutes or just a short amount of time, hit the key points of what's going on in the building so that everybody hears, you know, the report is short, but at least that you know, if there's something major going on that's reported on, everybody hears about it. But we try to keep that short, 10 to 15 minutes, so the rest of the 2 hours are on these other topics.
Yeah, that will happen naturally.
Yeah.
I would think, you know, if there's a big issue, nobody would really know until the issue is discussed, so I think that would happen naturally, but maybe, you know, if you wanna formalize it.
Yeah, I have a
formalize it,
short
yeah.
blurb at the beginning.
Yeah, we're actually gonna structure our admin meetings. There'll be 15 or 20 minutes for housekeeping kinds of stuff, the updates, and then the rest of it will be on, for us, it's topics around curriculum, teaching and learning.
Yeah.
Because anything else can be communicated through
Yeah.
some other medium.
I think that's good. The only other thing I wanted to clear up with this is when Ann was talking about those, you know, if we wanted to have the committee's decided we wanted to have a, you know, short meeting together to discuss a certain topic, for instance. I know it has to be a public meeting, but can we, you know, we're thinking, well, why can't we get together for an hour and not have, you know, nobody else is obligated to come? And if it's like, with our, for instance, the budget workshop last year, and I know we talked about this, but it wasn't the way we kind of envisioned it. We envisioned it more as a workshop where we were educated or learning things about how the budget works, and it became a very different thing. So like that kind of a meeting can, you know, we're thinking maybe do we have a lot of flexibility?
It's really tough because once you put down we're having a budget workshop, there's definitely enough attention on the
Yeah.
finances in the town
Right.
that it becomes a magnet, and that's precisely what happened with that meeting, and it became like,
Right, yeah, I understand that, and it was
But is there a
also-
way though for us to keep it, so like in a regular meeting, there's a time for public comment. We discuss, we ask whatever, and then there's a chance for public comment, as opposed to having everybody sit at the same table And
Oh, absolutely.
so we can arrange it that way,
Yep.
that's legit.
That's it. The chair can run that meeting and say, you know, this is the opportunity, and we'll take comments from the floor, and you have 3 minutes, ready, set, go. And then when that's,
So it might seem like December, after the regular December meeting, might be a time, because that's when we will have the budget documents in hand, right?
Yep.
We'll have had it presented here, so then we could take it and chew on it and
Right, and then come back.
dissect it.
But there might be some other issues and topics that we would like to discuss
Oh.
that may not be budgeted as well, that could be at a different time that, you know, could also fall in this category.
Well, yeah, we could talk about the World Language Committee, we
Right,
could talk
exactly,
about
yeah.
health and wellness. There could be all sorts of things that there just isn't really time for, or doesn't seem this is the appropriate forum for, but mostly time for.
Right.
Where something comes up between meetings and we've established that we've already had topics for the other meetings. Like in budget season, everything else falls to the wayside.
As long as we don't vote on anything, I mean, I know
Yeah,
that
right.
when you're in a public meeting, you know, you have that quorum, you
Mhm.
know, and then you can vote on anything. But, if we agree that that's not what it's for, we're not there to vote on anything, you know, and it's more of a workshop, either a learning situation or an open discussion situation.
I think that your approach with the October, saying, you know, here are 2 or 3 items, and let's take a relatively deep dive into them and have this be a, you know, 90-minute meeting kind of thing is great. You know, I think there's a tendency sometimes for committees everywhere to pack an agenda, and it's just not realistic to think you're gonna spend, or you're gonna give short shrift to everything. And then you kind of leave thinking, what do we do?
So maybe, since December's a busy month, maybe that we should, at our next meeting, maybe have some dates after our regular December meeting, the next week or two, where we could perhaps meet again then.
Those little small meetings or whatever that
Yeah,
we're talking
yeah,
about.
to have a calendar.
Well, like, I guess
So-
what I'm asking is if we were, let's say we sent you an email, one of us sent you an email, or Frank sent you an email saying, hey, you know, the school committee's, you know, planning to meet next week for an hour to go over and let's put the budget aside, but, you know, whatever, something, yeah, you know, so somebody's coming to talk to us about, you know, I don't know, what are the topics, that you were talking about, yeah, wellness or whatever, nutrition. Would you feel like obligated that you had to be there? And that's, you know, I mean, that's what,
Right.
well, no, that's what I'm asking, you know, if we wanted to do
You can
these
be nervous,
things.
Susan.
Well, no, I didn't,
I know, I
trying to
understand.
make less of a burden for the administration and allow us to
Right.
do things without having to always.
We would probably try to have someone there, but like, you know, if it's something that Karen was really working on, or something that's curricular related, Karen would probably want to be, do I have to be there? No, and I wouldn't feel like I had to be there unless it's the will of the committee that I be there.
Yeah.
Then that's absolutely, I would feel quite fine. If it's something that's really, you wanna really talk very deeply about circuit breaker and you want an audience with Chris, that's great.
Right, right.
No. I would be fine with that.
Yeah, no, I was just kind of curious. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So why don't we see this next
Yeah,
meeting,
see
how
it works
this
out. Yeah,
revised thing works, then we can go on from there.
good idea.
So, and those who have, any comments you want to make on the enrollment?
No, I did want to bring up though under special items and new business, Mrs. Fattori asked that this be added, she said the idea of a joint elementary schools December school committee meeting, and this came from very well intended, from the idea of, are there pressure points that both elementary schools both committees would like to discuss or hear about, so why not bring both committees together? So it wouldn't be a joint meeting of the 3, it would be the elementary schools and anyone else who wants to attend, and she just wanted to put that out on, you know, the foreign language, the FLES program, UBD, maybe writing, some of the things that are clearly anchored in both buildings in the interest of efficiency and collaboration. It made sense, and she just wanted to know what the thoughts were from the Sherborn School Committee.
We tried doing
December,
that
the right
last
month.
year.
December, I know, we just overcommitted December. Happy holidays.
Well, we tried doing that last year, right, Steve? I think
We did.
And for some reason it didn't work because the region decided they were gonna show up and, remember that? No, it was on our agenda for a joint,
And it blew up
and
into
then,
something bigger.
and and I think it was because of the
On
topic.
the foreign language, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it was
It
because
was.
of the topic,
That's what it was.
so,
Do they have suggested dates, or?
She was suggesting, she didn't put any dates with that, and Dover has moved forward with that modified meeting schedule already, so they
Oh,
don't
right.
meet every month.
right,
They continued that practice, so I was tempted to think, are we queued up for something like this in November, which is still sort of pre-budget thrust? But I need to look and see if they're meeting in November.
Okay.
Let me check on that. And the enrollment report was just our attempt, you know, it kind of bothered us that we'd have these pieces of paper in your packet, and people would be sitting there looking at the Pine Hill and think, what does this mean for the region 2 years from now, you know, and those kinds of futuristic questions, and so this provides a snapshot, color-coded, everything we do for Sherborn, for Pine Hills in blue, everything for Dover is always in red, and the region's always yellow. So this takes a look at by graduating class, by building, by district, and it even breaks down MECO population, as well as any foreign enrollments that we may have at the secondary level. So this was our attempt to give you a snapshot of the school system.
Do you know what would be really interesting is if we could see the number of kids who leave the district versus the number of kids who enter the district, only because, like, I happen to know that in the class of 2019, it was like 10 kids left, but there's only a difference of 1, so clearly a lot of kids came in. But I think it's interesting to note that it's not because just 1 student left, but because there
So-
must have been a lot of turnover.
So the staffing enrollment report that we mentioned, how it had multiple iterations over the summer, we actually asked the administrative team at Pine Hill to monitor enrollments and withdrawals from each grade. And so that report shows that. So you'll be able to see over a summer, say out of the 3rd grade class, what's the ringing?
Be back. Thank you.
You okay? Thanks, Pat. You'll be able to see thanks. You'll be able to see the ins and outs for each graduating class, which is kind of interesting to
Thank you.
monitor.
Yeah, good.
Just a curiosity on the numbers, you have a number reported out for Pine Hill, and then, which is the enrollment, the September 1 enrollment or the June enrollment, and then you have a medical number next to that. So is my total for Sherborn Elementary School the 358 number at the bottom, which would be for the 2013 to 14 year, plus 11, which is MECO?
Yep.
Or is it 358 and 11 of those are MECO?
Nope, those are actually, so those students are 358. Oh, it's of that, how many are also MECO students?
So the total is 358, and of those 358, 11 are MECO. Great, okay.
Okay, any other things on the regular agenda here?
And then on the back side, we have special ed numbers, in district, out of district, the districts as well.
Is less than 5, is that something the state makes you do?
We don't cite a number fewer than 5 for confidentiality
But
purposes.
is that
No.
practice?
Nope, something
Your
we've just
practice?
done institutionally here. And of course, you don't see any region yellow representation on here because the students are attributable back to the sending count.
Okay, so I think next we have a executive session coming up. Is there something else on the agenda?
I think,
Okay, so we have to do this by roll call. So it says to move to go to executive session for contract negotiations and campus security,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yes?
yep.
Yes.
Okay. Move to adjourn from open session, not to return to open session.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Okay, we're gonna have to move to
A different room, or do we?
Yeah.
Oh.